Every time I take my camera out of my bag, it is like drawing a sword to combat indifference, injustice, discrimination, and stereotypes. This is Corky Lee, the son of 2 Chinese immigrants and a dedicated advocate for Asian American representation in the late 1900s. Since Chinatown violence in the 1970s, Lee's relentless pursuit to photograph anti-Asian violence and racism has rightfully earned him the title Unofficial Asian American Photographer Laureate. To this day, we can thank him for the photographs he took of the diverse Asian American culture, people, and voices. However, unlike other famous activists, Corky is often overlooked as he is never visibly present in his photographs. Rather, he is always behind the scenes. Although we see historical photos in books and film, we rarely take account of those invisible heroes who captured these moments. Through his vast collection of photographs, Corky Lee has emerged as an unsung hero who has spearheaded the awareness and recognition of Asian Americans, all behind the scenes. Marginalized and silenced voices. In the 1900s, Asian Americans faced frequent marginalization and were subjected to harmful stereotypes. In the 1940s, Japanese Americans were denied constitutional rights when they were incarcerated in Japanese internment camps. In the 1970s, Chinese immigrants endured discriminatory immigration policies, notably at Angel Island, where they were subjected to degrading medical examinations and exhaustive interrogations. In these cells, Chinese characters were discovered to be carved into the wooden walls of the barracks, serving as a testament to the bitterness and frustration experienced by excluded Chinese immigrants. In the early 1980s, Asian Americans were blamed because of the failing of the auto industry. And throughout the decades, the stereotype of Asians as a model minority, high-achieving yet obedient, masks a history of discrimination. Asian American voices and identities have been forced into a monolith and have had little space to call for representation. That was until one unsung hero of the time, Corky Lee. A passion for representation. Born on September 5, 1947 in a small apartment in Queens, young Corky Lee, who is now widely known as Corky Lee, was the son of Chinese immigrants. His father, Lee Yin-chuk, ran a hand laundry business and served in World War II, while his mother, Zheng Lee, worked as a seamstress. Young Corky Lee was the second oldest among his 4 siblings. In 1961, Corky enrolled at Van Wyck Junior High School in Queens, where he observed the lack of representation of Asian Americans in his history classes and the marginalization that surrounded him. However, it was a specific incident that drove him to become the activist and photographer he is today. During his 8th grade American history class, Corky came across the iconic 1869 completion photo of the Transcontinental Railroad at Promontory Summit.
And I went to looking at the photograph, to count how many Chinese worked on the railroad. If you read about it in history and they have a photograph, that they must be there. But when I examined the photograph, I couldn't find a single Chinese.
He was confused by the absence of Chinese Americans in the image, despite their significant contributions to the construction of the railroad. This discrepancy sparked a deep emotional response within Corky as he saw, for the first time, a lack of Asian American voice in history. There was not a single person representing the 12,000 Chinese workers employed by the Central Pacific Company who had toiled through the Sierra Nevada mountains and laid 10 miles of tracks in a single day. Later, in a 2014 interview with NPR, Corky expressed a concern with what he saw that day. Quote, "History, at least photographically, says that the Chinese were not present." End quote. Motivated by the disregard for his community members' contributions, Corky became determined to rectify the historical narrative and depict Asian American history within the broader American context. After finishing high school and then Queens College in 1970, he was poised to pave the way for Asian American history. Yet, Corky's mission extended beyond recovering Asian American history. He also aimed to amplify the voice of the Asian American community, fighting for Asian American rights one photo at a time. In late April of 1975, Peter Yu, a 27-year-old Chinese American engineer, witnessed a traffic violation in Chinatown where NYPD officers were assaulting a 15-year-old. Outraged by the situation, Yu intervened, only to become a victim himself. Allegedly, the officers beat and arrested him and took him to the local jail, where he was further assaulted and charged with a felony. This incident served as a breaking point for the Chinatown residents, who had already suffered racism and dehumanizing treatment by the NYPD. In response, 20,000 students, teenagers, parents, and grandparents came together, marching and protesting against the abuse, eventually reaching City Hall. And, like most of his work, Corky Lee was there to record the abuse through his photography. Positioned right in front of the police officers, Corky captured what would become one of his most iconic photographs, later featured in the New York Times. In the photo, police officers escort Peter Yu as blood pours from his head and another activist tries to free him.
I believe that picture was published in all the major newspapers at that time, like the Daily News and the New York Post, and that by shedding a light on it, by photographing it and documenting it, it was a way of raising that awareness. I think that's a really important example.
This documentation gave a voice to the Asian Americans who protested on that day, as without his documentation, this event could have easily been forgotten. Although invisible and not present within the picture, Corky's ability to amplify the voices in his photographs truly made his activist work especially important. Yet, this was just one photograph among countless others in Corky's extensive collection. Corky had also recorded another event. In 1982, Vincent Chen, a Chinese American, was brutally beaten to death in a hate crime by two white auto workers who wrongly blamed him for the job layoffs in the auto industry. Chen's final words before dying in coma were, quote, "It's not fair," end quote. Lee documented the protests that followed the Vincent Chin murder trial in 1982 in Michigan, especially Chin's final statement. Although Corky Lee is never present within the photos himself, his actions paved the way for future generations to reflect on the past history of anti-Asian American violence. As State Senator John C. Leo, a Queens Democrat, once said, quote, "Corky Lee is synonymous with Asian American history in New York and beyond. Without his efforts, much of our history may have gone unnoticed and unchronicled," end quote. Furthermore, despite no pay, Corky always ventured off to whatever news or concern within the Asian American community there was.
No matter where you went in Chinatown, you could go to an art opening or a restaurant opening or a community meeting for a local political issue or, a dance performance, an event in the park, you name it. Corky Lee would be there. Nothing was too big or too small for him. He kept his finger on the pulse of everything that was happening in the community. And I think, regardless, you might ask, how interesting can, the 100th or the 1000th, little community meeting over some forgotten local issue be? Didn't matter for Corky. If it was happening to local residents, he cared enough about it to show up.
Corky's impact is enduring, capturing pivotal moments within Asian American communities and presenting them in the right light. As one Asian American expressed, quote, "The struggle was not only to have our stories told, but to make sure how they were told." Corky understood that. He told an insider story.
Right? He was really one of the first. And I think just by that virtue, and because he covered the community so intimately and you'd run into him all the time, and he knew everybody in China, right? I think he was a great example. He was a great role model. He was, and also a friend, and not competitive, not always collegial. I think it's important to remember that.
Whether it was photographing a Sikh individual wearing an American flag during a period of heightened Muslim violence or documenting the challenging conditions in Chinatown, Corky's ability to capture the uniqueness and the diversity of the Asian American community was truly astonishing. As Sunita S. Mukhi remarked during an exhibition of Corky's works in 2013 at Stony Brook University, quote, "Whenever there's anything related to Asian America, he seems to be there," end quote. When we reflect on historical events and the growth of Asian American advocacy, we frequently look at photos without acknowledging the photographer who brought the photos to us. In our eyes, Corky's photos may be just another relic of Asian American history, but to Corky, his photos were the first relics of Asian American history. Every single photograph captured by Corky Lee was infused with his unwavering dedication, hard work, and profound desire to create an authentic Asian American history. Today, his work, which now makes Asian Americans visible, impacts how we view American history. Because of his effort, he has been awarded the Susan An Award for Civil Rights and Social Justice in 2019 and the Artivist Award in 2016.
He wanted his pictures to be not just a historical and documentary record of our community and our people in that particular place and time, but for these pictures to go out into the world and to show ourselves and everybody else, for that matter, that we were indeed a specific community with its own special history.
Being one of the earliest Asian Americans to document countless events, Corky stands as an unheralded leader in his field. He inspired many aspiring photographers and activists to use their voices and art to bring attention to marginalized communities and promote social change. He is an unsung hero whose work to preserve the anti-Asian violence and the history of Asian Americans will forever be remembered.